Welcome in to another edition of the Lion Country Kia Goon and Ironhead Show. This is Chris Bucanati filling in for the beloved Goon today. I'm Jeff Byers filling in for the not-so-beloved Ironhead on this Thursday afternoon.
Totally
as
beloved.
We get ready for
Totally
the Big
beloved.
Ten showdown between the Nittany Lions and the Hoosiers on Saturday night. And I want to start, Chris, because I was listening to Steve Jones earlier in the week on the local station here talking about, and I agree with him to some extent. He said, when it comes to, there was a discussion on revenge games and whether or not Penn State is motivated because of the loss last year and the way it went down to Indiana. And Steve saying, listen, that stuff, it's fun for the media and the fans, but the players, they can't get into that stuff, and they don't get into that stuff. And I think generally that may be true. I think generally probably fans take that stuff a little more to heart. And one of Steve's points is, listen, every year the makeup, I mean, we have some players on that Penn State squad that weren't there last year. They can give a rip about, they may be indoctrinated, but in terms of it personally impacting them, it didn't. And, some of the guys that may have taken it more personally may be gone now. And, the chemistry and all of that is different each year. And so I think generally that, yes, media and fans make more of that stuff than players and coaches do, but I do think there are exceptions. And I don't know necessarily if this is a huge exception, because truthfully, Penn State's beef isn't with Indiana. Like that Maryland game, the refusing to shake hands, that I think you take personally, and that you try to take out on the team that did that to you. Like, that's a different scenario in my mind.
Correct.
The Indiana game, it was the officials made the wrong call at the end of the game. And to Joe Paterno's old point, you don't want a team that's just going to come in here and hand you the victory. Like, it wasn't like Indiana, you want them to go out and play their best. Like, that's what you're asking your opponents to do.
Look, the revenge game thing, my number one point is when you are Penn State and you're playing Indiana in football, you have over 900 wins in your program history. You have multiple undefeated seasons, a Sterling Bowl record, 2 national championships, multiple Big Ten titles. You don't get revenge on Indiana for anything in football. They don't rise to the level of an opponent who deserves to be gotten revenge on.
Yes.
And again, to your point, what exactly are we avenging? Like, damn you for picking up those fumbles and catching those interceptions we threw right to you. And damn you for getting out of the way, which was a smart thing to do when Devin Ford didn't take a knee.
Yeah.
And damn you for being 2 inches short of the goal line and accepting a call that was going to go your way, whether you celebrated it or not. There's nothing to avenge in this game.
Yeah.
All of that being said, I don't care what James says in his press conference. I do get the impression like it's a revenge game.
Yeah, I do think, listen.
I don't love it, but I think it is. And
I do think, and listen, I think each week, right, you try to tap in, and I think you could overdo it, and I think there's a fine line there as a coach or a player in terms of, every week we have a chip on our shoulder, but to play this game, a physical game like football successfully, you need to have a chip on your shoulder every week. You got to find something to, other than, hey, we just want to go out and win and do our best. And yes, you want to do that and all of that. But, even against the Ball States of the world, like, you got to find something that week that, hey, I need to go out and do my best because we got to take care of business. But you got to find some kind of, football is a game that is played with passion, and if you're not playing it with passion, bad things can happen, including injuries. Right? We talk about this all the time. That the moment you get a little complacent on a football field is when you can get injured anytime. But it makes the likelihood greater because again, the other guy is out there busting his tail. And, when you're into the backup role, even more so sometimes, right? I mean, the couple of late scores for Villanova, like that's something that Villanova program wants to build on for the rest of the season. They're going to point back to that. Hey, we got a couple of late touchdowns there against Penn State. They're not going to point out that it was against the reserves or that the game was out of hand. It's going to be, hey, it's time to grind it out in a big game here,
in the towel
trying to get into the playoffs, right? Yep. And this is when we harken back to that success. So, I do think there's going to be some emotion, additional emotion for Penn State in this game, but I don't think for 4 quarters these guys on the sidelines are going to be, and take that. That's what you get for getting a touchdown when you didn't earn it last year. Like, again, right at the beginning, maybe that first touchdown, you're like, yes, by God, we're back, and this is how Penn State should be treating Indiana and that sort of thing. I just don't think the sustained drive is going to be there over that. It's just my opinion, having never really been inside a locker room at this level. But I just don't think there are much bigger and hopefully for Penn State's sake, better things on the horizon than a win over Indiana at Beaver Stadium, right? I mean, this is a game that you need to win. Sure. And listen, Indiana is dangerous enough that if you're not out there playing with that emotion, but again, it's a night game at Beaver Stadium. This is an Indiana team that is a little banged up in some key spots, and an Indiana team that I don't think is brimming with confidence right now. Certainly a quarterback that's not brimming with confidence at the moment.
And look, they were a nice little story for a weird,
really nice
once in a lifetime season last year, and that's it. They did not deserve to be ranked in the top 14. I was never, ever buying into the mirage of Indiana football in the preseason where people were talking about them as a Rose Bowl contender. I'm like, guys, come on. Did you notice no one got to practice last year? And the best they could do was win 7 games, finish second in a fake division in a fake season, and lose their bowl game. Congratulations. What do you want, a medal or a chest to pin it on, guys? They're an average football team, which for Indiana is great. For years and years, they were a total joke program and a joker team, and now they're not. You got to play them seriously, and that's a credit to Tom Allen. If you don't think there's a huge talent disparity between IU football and Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and probably a handful of other teams in the conference, you're nuts.
Yeah, and listen, I think Allen is a terrific coach. I really have a ton of respect for him. And there may be years, right, where because of how good of a coach he is and the way he's able to get teams together, but it's going to be kind of like, that a year where you have a bunch of 4th and 5th year guys and they've been able to grind it out and you're able to put it all together. And I think, to me, their ceiling is kind of like Northwestern. And I think Pat Fitzgerald obviously is a terrific coach too. But there are some limits to what, Northwestern isn't going to be competing for national titles on a regular basis. Maybe once in a blue moon.
Don't tell the guy who just gave him $500 million for a new football stadium.
I understood. But it's not. I'm going to go out on a limb and tell you
the Ryan family is throwing good money after bad, I think.
And listen, I'm not sitting here telling you that it could never happen. I mean, I will be one of those guys that I'm big on the never say never.
Sure.
Could they have a magical year where everything comes together and they're in the playoffs? Sure, that could happen. I think it's unlikely, but what is much more unlikely, and I feel a virtual certainty, is that, again, Northwestern or Indiana, as good as Fitzgerald and Allen are, and I truly do think they are great coaches, but they're not going to be able to recruit the type of talent consistently enough at those programs to be able to compete on a regular basis with the Alabamas. Yes, with the Alabamas and the Penn State's, Ohio State's, etc. Again, that's not saying that you can't do it once in a blue moon, but those places are not places where you are going to, be in the college football playoffs 3 out of 5 years. Like that's not happening.
Well, so my wife and I split our season men's basketball tickets with a couple who went to IU for undergrad and then Penn State for their graduate degrees. So they've got perspectives on both schools. And we always talk about how in many ways, athletically, they're mirror images of each other. And one of the reasons why you're not going to be able to consistently compete in football at Indiana is the institutional commitment is not there. Just to spend the kind of money supporting the program, facilities, coaching, salaries, all of those things. And so to draw it back to the revenge game thing, I will give you a couple of notes on that. The first is that talking about fuel for your football team. We asked Brandon Noble about this on the last podcast, and he shocked the hell out of me and Mike the mailman especially, because I think Mike and I were both expecting him to give kind of the Steve Jones answer of, year to year, we don't really think about those things. And he was like, yeah, that's a real thing. He said, you find anything you can from week to week to get up. And if you can go back and look at game tape of last year and say, these guys took one from us and maybe we feel like that set our whole season headed off on the wrong track, that'll get you up for the game a little bit. And the other thing, when you talk about after the first couple of plays, I agree. I don't think the players are going to be replaying the 2020 IU game in their brains for 4 quarters. But you know who is, I think James Franklin. That guy, he absolutely has a little bit of a vindictive streak in him.
He does.
And I hate myself for it, but I kind of like it.
I'm with you.
I kind of enjoy and indulge the dark side of my personality. When we are beating up on a team that I think deserves to get beat up on, and he calls a fly pattern in the 4th quarter. I kind of like that. And I think that every coach in the Big Ten is going to be in the same boat this year. I think they are going to be looking to put it to Indiana to remind them where their place is in the pecking order. So just so you guys don't get too uppity, we got a little something for you this year because we got to have practice this year. So this is a real season now. And Kevin Horn told us that the absolute worst fan behavior he has ever experienced. This is someone who went to every away game prior to and after the scandal for several years. Worst fan behavior in his entire lifetime. Bloomington last year after the Indiana game because they don't know how to win Ironhead. Listen, drunken college students are going to be drunken college students anywhere. But when you have the unique stressors of 2020 and a fan base that doesn't know what it means to win in football, that's a bad combination, and it turned out bad. And our good mutual friend Tom Fallon tweeted to me this week that when he had Jahan Dotson on his show this summer and asked him the question, which team's players talked the most smack last year? Just like their fans. He said it was hands down not even close. Indiana talked the most smack to them because they don't know how to win either, Ironhead. That was found by I said, I'm not even going to call them nouveau riche. They didn't hit the lottery. They just won the scratch off and all of a sudden thought they were Bill Gates. And so, I think this coaching staff is going to remember this. And I think every other coaching staff in the Big Ten is. And I think Indiana better, they better get the ice bath ready because they're going to get a lot of ass kickings this year.
I will say, and listen, again, if you've followed me over the years at all or this program at all since its inception, to go to the bank and bet the exact opposite of what I'm saying. But I feel very confident. Listen, am I not right that through 4 games this season, I think the Villanova game is the only game that Penn State didn't cover. I'm almost. I mean, Wisconsin obviously did because they were the underdog. Ball State, I think, there wasn't a huge margin, and they covered there. And then Auburn was 5.5 or 6 or something.
Auburn got as high as 7, but wherever you got in,
they covered that anyways. And Villanova, they had covered, and then again a couple of garbage time.
So you got to be careful of those big lines when the third string D gets in.
Well, here's to your point earlier on Franklin's vindictiveness, and I feel, and I think the line's like around 12, right? It's 11.5 or 12. This Penn State. I haven't looked at it today,
it's shifted
but it
around
was in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
I am telling you. For several reasons, I feel very confident that Penn State is going to cover this week, and I'm a little surprised. And it's not because I think Indiana, again, if you are not dialed in on this Indiana team, I think they are a dangerous team. I think they're one of the less dangerous teams, though, on Penn State's schedule because, I think we've talked about, but Rutgers and Maryland, if you ask those players, those probably coaches, but certainly the players and the fan base, if you can only win one game this year, you can go 1-11. What's the one game that you really would? It's Penn State, and it's hands down with both of those programs. And I think both of those teams are. I think they're both better than Indiana right now, top to bottom. And across
I think
the board.
It's obvious that they're both better than Indiana.
So, I think every game has the potential to be dangerous in the Big Ten. I really do, but I think this is the least dangerous game. Ball State, Villanova maybe not included. Outside of Villanova, I think this is the least dangerous game on Penn State's schedule.
You think more so than Illinois?
I do, and for these reasons, and I'll go through. There's basically 5 reasons. Okay. There's probably more than that, but
I think I've got another one for you.
There's 5 reasons off the top of my head that I think Indiana is the least dangerous, and it has not a whole lot to do with Indiana. Although I do think that the overall talent differential between Penn State and Indiana is probably as great as any other than maybe Illinois in the Big Ten this season. But, Penn State does have, however much you want to buy into it, there is a chip on the shoulder that they feel like they lost a game that they should not have to a team that they should not have. And I didn't even know about the trash talking and all of that. But that stuff I do think stays with you more as a player. And I do think that can sustain over 4 quarters. If you're remembering that this guy I'm lining up against last year was talking crap after the game, I think for 4 quarters you could. How's that win last year looking for you now?
Yeah,
jackass. Yeah. I mean, I do think that stuff. So I do think there's whatever degree you want to put the revenge factor, but I do think it is a factor in this game. Listen, it is a night game at home for Penn State. Very rarely, I know the whiteout record isn't as great as what a lot of people think it maybe ought to be or should be, but almost all of those losses in the whiteout games came to teams that were really good,
that won national
and
titles,
were highly ranked.
The Big Ten.
Right? Yes. Big Ten. I mean, they very rarely, and I'll have to go back. I mean, I didn't do any research on this. I'm telling you, it is very rare that Penn State is losing a game at night at Beaver Stadium to a team with inferior talent. Like, that does not happen often at all.
Yep.
And Indiana clearly has inferior talent. I also think this offense is on the verge of doing big things. This is about the time, and not that I think that there's an exact comparison here, but this is Game 5 is kind of when that Joe Moorhead offense came together and started lighting it up. And we have kind of a running joke with my buddies that started that season. It's like Penn State would score after being down a couple of touchdowns or whatever, and it's like, here comes the onslaught, and the onslaught came.
Yep.
And I feel like that scenario could very well play out here Saturday night, where it maybe is a 7-7 or 10-10 game, and then all of a sudden, boom, boom, boom. Jahan Dotson with a couple of touchdowns. Parker Washington. That passing game, and I know it was Villanova last week, but that passing game is coming together better and better. And I do think Penn State has a bit of a chip on its shoulder right now, rightfully so, with the running game. It better have, if it doesn't, right? Like, these guys have to be wanting to go out and no, by God, at least against Indiana, we are going to show that we can control the line of scrimmage. And that has to be
nice.
The players' mentality going into this game. So I think there's that component too. I also think Indiana is they're banged up. This is not Penn State, at least from everything we know right now, is remarkably healthy through 4 games this season. And, that is part of the equation here. And the other thing, my fifth reason that I think Penn State is in very good shape to not just win but to cover is I think Penn State wants to, as much as it wants to exact revenge against Indiana, I think it wants to set the tone for that Iowa game and send a message to the Hawkeyes that, we are coming. And I don't think James Franklin or this team, that fourth quarter against Villanova, again, they knew the game was over, a couple of big plays, whatever. I think they are not going to let those plays, even if that opportunity, if it's 38-3 in the fourth quarter against Indiana, I don't think it's ending up 38-17. I think it's ending up 45-3.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you're going to see the starters out as early. And I think you're going to see coaching staff and players wanting to keep the foot down on the gas pedal. So,
please do.
So I just it is very rare that I feel confident about a blowout in a Big Ten game, and especially one where, again, I think Indiana has some good athletes and can be a dangerous team. This game, to me, has like a 5-touchdown margin written all over it. I just think Penn State is going to absolutely smoke Indiana Saturday night.
I hope so. I mean, in conference play, even James Franklin's best teams have not really been able to put together a game like the 2012 Iowa game, where we went out there and we just absolutely blew the doors off them. That's not fair. Probably the 2017 Iowa game was like that too. We did the same thing to them, just 4 quarters, start to finish. Absolutely made it rain, and that was a night game too, Ironhead. So maybe this is a similar deal. It's interesting. You brought up how you think it's going to go, that Indiana can hang around for a while, and then the rain starts.
I'm not overly confident that Indiana can hang for a while, by the way.
Well, but I mean, look, they're an average Big Ten football team. There's no reason to think that they can't at least comport themselves respectably in the first half, and I think their best game this season, by far, honestly, is that loss to Cincinnati. Because they looked like they belonged on the field with a good Cincinnati team. I'm still not entirely sure how good Cincinnati is this year, but
I'm still not sure how good anybody
is. Alabama is good. Yeah, everyone else stinks.
But even Alabama, they are good. I'm not sure how good Alabama is. I think they're playoff good, and that's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
But I'm not as sure about that even this year as I normally am. I feel very confident that they're a top 10 team, hands down. And probably a top 4 team. But outside of that, again, even Oregon, Goon and I were talking about Oregon on Tuesday. And listen, the Oregon win over Ohio State is good. Going into Columbus. But let's see how this season plays out, because I'm telling you, and again, bad news for Penn State fans that are wanting to win out there. As we get closer to that game, I'm more confident about Penn State winning Ohio State than I've ever been. And I'm never confident about a Penn State
Indiana. All right. And let's talk about it. After last week, I'm a big believer in Georgia because I love their defense. And we saw, look, they were so close, Ironhead. They were one bad field goal away from us talking about Kirby Smart and their program in the same way we talk about Clemson, Ohio State, and Bama. So I believe in Georgia. I believe in Alabama because Nick Saban and the track record. After last weekend, I'm pretty sure everybody else is bad. So there's 2 good teams and 128 bad ones. But so that Indiana being able to hang with Cincy, probably their best game of the season, even though it was an L. I could see this game playing out the same way, where Penn State has to wear them down a little bit in front of the crowd. But, the other thing, too, is you brought up that 5th game against Maryland in 2016. That was the game where the Joe Moorhead offense really started to click.
Come together.
It took a half, if you remember, it took a half for that to happen. And then once everything fell into place, the second half, Penn State absolutely blew them off the field. And going back to revenge games, I think we still felt like that was a team we owed a little something because it was the first time back in Beaver Stadium since the handshake game. Now, we had beaten them in like the Ravens Stadium the year before. But getting them back in the Beav, I think there was a little something extra in the air that night. And again, staying on the Maryland point and talking about Iowa, I think they've got their hands full tomorrow night. How do you? I'm just curious how you think about that game.
I'm really curious to see how that one plays out. I do.
Like, you have to favor Iowa for sure, but like I don't feel super confident about it.
And I feel like I keep I feel like I'm getting to talk more coach speak as I get older, which I hate. But I do think there's something to the whole, each week is a season unto itself. Mm-hmm. And I really do think, and looking back over the years, I am one that gets, I think, too caught up in what has happened, the previous couple of weeks. Now, that I also am a believer in momentum and all that, but it really is matchups and kind of how a team as a whole is responding in a given week. And especially in college football, there are so many different dynamics, right? If there is there's just weird things that you wouldn't even think of that can happen in a locker room over the course of a season that can change the dynamics. I mean, if one player's girlfriend breaks up with him and she starts dating another teammate, right? There's just as a bizarre example. There's all kinds of things that can happen that you have no idea. And there could be illness in a kid's family, and if it's a kid that everybody likes, that can have an impact if you see that it's weighing on your. There's all kinds of things that can have an impact that can take things away from a team's focus and all of that. So it is. I think it's one of the reasons that it is really hard to kind of predict and what's going to happen and why. What Alabama and Clemson until this year have been able to do in terms of that consistency is truly remarkable. And yes, it all starts with recruiting, and there's no question they've done a great job of getting the horses and riding them. But even with that, there's still a lot of things that have to come together, and that a coaching staff has to be able to get these kids to buy in. Again, every coach at every level I've ever been around talks about, hey, once you're in the practice, your focus has to be just here. And that's a wonderful thing to say, and it's a wonderful thing to do, but it's one of those things that's easier said than done, right? Yeah. And getting guys to actually be able to do that. And again, it's from afar. I'm no longer on the beat like I once was or any of that. So all of this is just from a distance for me. But sometimes I think it's easier to see things from a distance. And it just feels like this team has that ability. I'm sure there are guys dealing with all kinds of stuff, right? But, man, it feels like when they are genuinely together here and committed on a goal and a purpose and a focus as a collective group. And again, part of it is luck. And I do think, again, knock on wood here, but they've been very fortunate on the injury front to this point in the season. I think that they've created some opportunities for themselves, but they've also, been fortunate that other teams have made some mistakes. And listen, they've also overcome. The Auburn, the officiating in that game and the calls. So I think, 4 games in, I do think this team has been well tested, at Wisconsin. And again, with some questionable at best calls in the Auburn game. I think keeping the focus against, Ball State and Villanova. And I think overall there has been a good progress. I think, to me, through 4 games, I don't think you could ask above and beyond the record, and obviously 4-0 is exactly where you want to be. But in terms of getting tested, in terms of facing different types of adversity and all of that, I think this team is exactly where you want it to be. And what I'm expecting Saturday night, because I also do think, listen, the coaches now have a sense of, okay, this is what we have. I'm sure they're seeing some areas of concern and weakness. And listen, we got to keep working to get better with the ground game and figure out our short yardage stuff. But I don't think there's anybody that thinks we've seen the full force of what this offense is capable of. And one of the things that I think is going to be neat to see, starting Saturday night, but throughout the rest of the season, because what I think is going to happen is you're going to see it's not going to be the same thing every week. Last week, Jahan Dotson and Parker Washington had their way. And I think part of that is they are just two really, really good wideouts. Yep. Obviously, Dotson we knew, but I think Parker is right there now as a really fantastic option 1A. But I think the tight ends and the running backs are still, if need be, really vital assets to that passing game. And I think Sean Clifford's understanding now of this offense, of what Mike Yurcich, and of football in general now, having been through everything he's been through. I just, maybe I'm overdoing the comparison with 2016, but I really think this offense is going to start lighting it up. And I think when you look at what this defense can do, again, I do think that ceiling is remarkably high for what this team can do this season. Now, at Iowa, at Ohio State, and again, any one of these other games, could Penn State still go 9-3? Yeah, it could happen. But man, I'm telling you, I don't see it unless a rash of injuries at the wrong spots occur. I just think this team is dialed in, and I think this coaching staff has a good enough feel for how to utilize the guys they have in ways to maximize the opportunities that I feel really, really good about both this game Saturday night and what this team is at least capable of doing and what I think it is going to do this season.
Well, let me throw a question at you, and I'm going to put you on the spot and catch you off guard. I'm just curious to hear your reaction. So going back to last weekend, I understand we can only work with the information that we have right now.
Yeah.
And probably the feelings you had about any number of college football teams going into last Saturday are different than the way you feel right now.
For sure.
Because of the way those teams played. Like, let's just go back to Maryland as an example. I want to talk about the strength of the conference. You maybe feel even more confident that is at least going to be a tough out this year, seeing West Virginia, who they beat, take Oklahoma right down to the wire, right? So who knows what's going to happen to change our view of things. And I think this is going to be a very interesting winnowing weekend for the Big Ten. There are going to be some great measuring stick games. And Iowa, Maryland is probably the one I'm most interested in. I don't think there is a chance in hell that Rutgers can beat Ohio State.
I don't think so either, but I'm really curious to see how wide that gap is. Because I don't think it's going to be your normal.
If Rutgers looks good and Ohio State looks bad, I think we're going to learn something about both of those teams. And then to me, probably the most fascinating game for sure is Wisconsin-Michigan, right? Because if you looked at Wisconsin's schedule at the beginning of the year, and when I had to predict how the divisions were going to shake out, I had Wisconsin finishing 10-2 and starting 2-2, just like they are, because we're so down on them right now because of the way the fourth quarter went and that final score. And also the fact that Graham Mertz looks like ice cold dog crap. I mean, he looks really, really bad. But the rest of their schedule is very manageable. They dodge Ohio State. They don't have to play Iowa until the end of the year. And if they can get past Michigan, then they could get right back into the mix for a spot in the Big Ten championship game. And Michigan, same deal. Like, they have got to show that they can do it against a defense that we know is legit. Give up 9 rushing yards. The Fighting Irish last week, the Badgers did. So, again, who knows? We'll see what we're going to find out about the rest of the conference after these games get played this weekend. But based on what we're seeing now, Big Ten East, 4 teams ranked. Maryland's catching votes. Rutgers is probably, believe it or not, right on the cusp of catching votes. And if they would have gotten to play like Illinois and be 4-1 instead of have to play Ohio State this week, they absolutely would have been in that others receiving votes category. And then you got Indiana as
very well last week against. I mean, that was a one touchdown game.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There was a 1-score game in the fourth quarter and finished as a 1-score game. It was 20-13.
Yeah.
So, and as we discussed, Indiana, absolutely, in my mind, the least of the 7 teams in Big Ten East, still an average team.
Yeah, it's still a relatively dangerous team.
You got to go to Kinnick. You got to go to the Horseshoe.
Yep.
You got to go to East Lansing, and you got to go on the road at Maryland. We've already started the season at Wisconsin. We've had to host Auburn at home. Can you, Ironhead, as a longtime media person covering Penn State football and a fan long before that, can you think of, prior to the switch from independent to Big Ten, a more rigorous regular season schedule than what we think today, based on what we know Penn State has? I think you have to go back to the independent era when we were, playing Notre Dame.
I would agree. The 80s certainly. There were some seasons, but no, in terms of. And listen, this is one of the things that I do think is going to be fascinating as this plays out, is obviously these teams are going to be playing each other, and there's going to be losses mounting up one way or the other.
Yeah, right.
But it may be we have a bunch of 2-loss teams, or it may be that some of these teams that I think are really good, and I think could still be very good at the end of the season, are still going to be 7-5 or 8-4 teams. And I think that's going to be the case with a Rutgers and probably a Maryland, although I'm with you. I'm really curious to see that Maryland-Iowa game, because I do think Maryland, I think as good as Iowa has been, and I do think Iowa's been very good, but we keep talking about it. You keep reevaluating each week. So that win over Iowa State, looked great. Now it doesn't look as good after Baylor.
Being good.
No, and that was, and again, I do think there's, over the course of 12 weeks, you're going to have a letdown at some point. Every team is, you are. And Alabama's had, we've had games, I think, pretty much every year where it's like you're just scratching your head. It's like, wait, Alabama only beat that lousy team by a couple of touchdowns?
That's a fun game, too, by the way, this weekend. Alabama versus the Fighting Lane Kiffins.
Yes, I'm with you. And so, I do want to see how everything plays out.
That's Bill O'Brien versus Lane Kiffin for the USC job, probably. A lot of money on the line this weekend.
Could be. But listen, I do think, I think the fact that you are going on the road for.
I'm sorry, I'm kidding. Can you imagine Bill O'Brien in Los Angeles trying to coach USC?
I can imagine it. I can imagine how it would go and how long it would go.
Go ahead.
I don't think Bill O'Brien would have. I think he would have less than zero interest.
I'm being
in that job. USC might have some interest. I don't know in him, although not a good. And Bill O'Brien, by the way, I still think is a terrific coach. I just
same. 100%.
And I think at some point he gets another shot in the NFL, and I think he will be able to pick a situation that is a little more amenable to him, and I think he'll have more success at his next venture, wherever it may be in the NFL. Anyways. Here's the thing with the Big Ten East, though. So, I think Michigan State's really good, but I don't think Michigan State is Penn State, Ohio State, probably Michigan good. And I'm not even sure Maryland. I'm starting to get very impressed with Maryland, and that's why I'm with you. I'm really intrigued to see that Maryland-Iowa game because it feels to me more of a toss-up game. And I do wonder if Iowa, and I know it's Friday night, and that probably helps the Iowa cause because I think it's less likely that they're looking ahead to Penn State, but you can't tell me that there isn't that thought isn't creeping into some of those kids' minds that, hey, next week, man, we get to host Penn State at 4 o'clock kick. And I'm telling you, if that focus isn't on that Maryland game, I think even if the focus is on the Maryland game, this is a really dangerous game. I think Maryland is maybe the most – has the chance to be the most surprising team in the Big Ten. Like Arkansas, I think, is unquestionably the most surprising team in the SEC. I think Maryland – and I think Arkansas has a chance to do some really special things. I don't know if Maryland has that chance or not, but we said it when they hired Locke. That dude just flat out knows how to coach and knows how to recruit, and he's in a recruiting hotbed. Like Maryland and its neighboring states, that is phenomenal high school football talent to be able to recruit from, and. Again, I think he is a guy, he's got a great personality. He's got a clear understanding of what he wants to do with that program. And I do think, both he and Greg Schiano are doing just fantastic coaching jobs
at both
this
places,
season.
The kids seem bought in
all in. Year. I think all in.
And the thing that's interesting to me about Maryland and where I'm going to give the edge to Iowa because I'm going to respect that defense and I'm going to respect what Kirk Ferentz has done, body of work-wise. Yep. But Maryland does have the kind of offense that can really give you headaches.
And here's the thing, right? and if that defense buckles a bit for Iowa, right? That's really bad news because I don't think that Hawkeyes team. I don't think that they are. And I think Maryland is a team that if it does find some holes in that Iowa defense, and that's a big if, I'll grant you. But if it does, it will exploit them, and it will exploit them the entire game. Yep. It's not going to be a situation where Iowa, if they get down a couple of scores, I think it's basically over because, I guess unless they can get some turnovers, because I don't think Maryland – I think Maryland will be able to sustain its scoring if it's able to score early.
Yeah, Maryland's D is not great, but they've got some good athletes who are kind of opportunistic ball hawk types.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say.
Get a short field on a turnover.
This game, as good as Iowa is in the turnover game, as well coached as they are, this game, it feels to me going in like it is more likely that Maryland wins the turnover battle to me. And I think if that happens again, and Maryland can get up early, I think that is a really dangerous game.
And here's the thing, real quickly, we hate Friday night football that does not involve high schools.
Hate it.
But that's a good, if you're going to have it, that is a really nice appetizer for the
Here's the problem. I'm not going to be able to see it because of high school football. I want to be able to watch that game.
Oh, it's terrible. I
might not be, if it was Saturday night, I wouldn't be able to watch it either because I'm going to be watching Penn State, Indiana. So, I get it. But it's, I would really love to just sit down and watch that game from start to finish.
I do think the unconventional timing, though, does favor the underdog.
I do, too. And I think – we'll see. I do think that is a really dangerous spot for Iowa. And I don't have a great feeling about it. I'm with you. If you pin me down, all right, who's going to win this game? I'm leaning but I'm telling you, it is a very slight lean for Iowa. If you pin me down, yes, I'm taking Iowa. Here's the other thing. So if you're a Penn State fan.
Then again, what would screw Penn State more if they lose next week? If they lost to an undefeated top 5 team or an Iowa team that had just face planted against Maryland?
Well, and that's where I was going to go.
So there's always going to be an equation of what is going to piss me off and disappoint me the most. So look out, Hawkeyes.
Yeah, and I think if you're a Penn State fan, even though you're facing both of these teams and you want them both to be highly regarded, right? I mean, to make the Penn State win look bigger. I think right now, because of where you're at in the season and everything else going into it, I think if you're a Penn State fan, you're rooting for Iowa, and
you
forgetting whether or not you hate
Maryland
to win
a 4-5 on the road. for sure.
At this stage of the season. Yeah. And the other part of it is, if Iowa loses that game Friday night, right? Now you're going to have an angry Iowa team that is going to be hearing about how, I think you're going to get a focused Iowa team next week regardless. I mean, I'm not saying if they beat Maryland, they're going to
making me sad already.
Yeah, be overlooking Penn State. But I do think they come in with an even bigger chip on their shoulder for that game. And I think if you're Penn State, part of this is where it's at. And yes, that Maryland game would have a chance if Maryland and Penn State both win out to that point. Right, I mean that could be a monumental matchup.
Yeah,
I just think it's unlikely Maryland's going to win out to that point. One, even with a win over Iowa, but I also think when you're looking at I haven't even looked at their schedule. And I'm saying that, but I think at this stage of the season, Penn State's number 4 right now. You want to kind of solidify that you are deserving of where you're at, and I think a big win over Indiana helps do that a little bit on Saturday night. But obviously, if you go into Kinnick then the next week and win the late afternoon start, now that gets you 2 quality road wins in conference play, along with, what I think is still a very good win over Auburn in the SEC at home. And I think, again, everything to me keeps going back to confidence and momentum. And it just keeps everything rolling in that regard. And I just think you're at that stage of the season where if that happens, then even if some of these other teams, as we keep talking about, how good do we think these teams are, even if some of these other games don't play out, and even if Iowa falls apart after that or whatever, I think Penn State then is solidified as a top 4-5 team, and then it all comes down. And again, when I say it all comes down to, I fully, readily admit they could stumble anywhere else along the way. And I will not be surprised. And I don't even think it's going to take Penn State overlooking a Rutgers or a Maryland or they'd have to overlook Illinois. But, all of those games, again, Penn State could be dialed in, ready to go, and still lose because those teams put together a great performance on a day when they needed it.
I've already accepted that that's going to happen, but I'm also trying to take this season 7 days at a time, so I'm not even worried about it. But to the point, Maryland's got to play Ohio State next week.
Okay, well
that is a brutal 2-game stretch. Now then they do go to Maryland and play Indiana afterwards. So again, what their record and the way their season goes is totally pivots on what happens on Friday night. Yeah,
and we'll see. I think it's going to be a fascinating and fun game.
I got to give Goon's prediction, by the way,
for Penn State.
For Penn State, he sent me this. Here's what the Goon says. He could be with us today. I am filling in for Keith Goon Conlon, and his prediction is Penn State 38, Indiana 13. He says, revenge on setting our last season into a major tailspin. I also believe that the Indiana game last year was the difference between Penn State going 0-5 and Penn State going 1-4, but that's another conversation.
Yeah.
Night game, fans stoked, revenge on the mind. I like Penn State by lots. The trap game before Iowa doesn't scare me. Take care of business, boys. Not a trap game. I wouldn't even call it that.
Yeah, I don't think it at all. I'm in that same neighborhood. I actually even have a wider. I'm going 41-10 Penn State Saturday night. I really do think. And I'm not going to be overly disappointed if this game is, it's only a couple of touchdown win for Penn State. I mean, I'm still going to be bullish on the rest of the season. I have that feeling going into this game Saturday night that this is the game where everything really and not that it hasn't come together. Again, you're 4-0 with wins over Wisconsin and Auburn. It's not as though this team has exactly been struggling to this point. I feel like you're going to come out of this game Saturday night thinking that Penn State I think you're going to come out of it thinking that Penn State is the team to beat in the Big Ten. Iowa, Ohio State, everybody else included. That's the type of performance I'm expecting to get Saturday night. for all of the reasons we've talked about. I think James Franklin wants it badly, but I think Mike Yurcich has an understanding now of what they have. I think this offense is the offensive line in particular, and the running game is going to play with a bit of a chip on its shoulder, and I think they will try to get that run game going against Indiana. And I think they need to get it going, to be honest with you, to set up what they want to accomplish in the remainder of the season. Again, I don't think that running game has to be a dominant force, but it has to exist. Yeah. Like, you have got to be able to get some yards on the ground in the Big Ten. I don't care how good your passing game is, how good your defense is. When you get into November and you're in the Big Ten and you're trying to beat the Ohio States and the Michigan States, you have got to get some yards, some tough, pounded-out yards on the ground. You have to be able to do that. And to be able to do that, again, it starts to me with you've got to be able to get something going against Indiana on Saturday night. And I think it's a point of focus for them this week. And I don't think it's necessarily what they need to beat Indiana Saturday night, but I do think they recognize they need it to get where they want to go this season. And so I think you're going to see it. And I think you'll see, and not that I think having some success against Indiana means that they're going to be able to get those tough yards when they need it at Iowa or at Ohio State or whatever. But I think that's where it starts. To have a chance to do that, and I do think it starts there this Saturday night. But I think Penn State's going to win very comfortably Saturday night.
I like it. I think I predicted like 28-17 on TV. I wasn't expecting quite the offensive explosion that a lot of other folks are. And the line's 10.5. We were asking about the line. I think you open at 11. Okay. I think it's down to 10.5. The more I have heard people talk about it,
we all have it.
Comfortable. The more I've heard people talk about it, the more I think, maybe this is a game where we open it up on them a little bit more. But I don't know. Maybe it's just still a little lingering skepticism from last season. But I believe in this team, but I don't know that I believe in them to put together 4 dominant quarters like we talked about that 2017 Iowa game. Yeah. You're going to have to show me that. Yeah. I'm not just going to come and say it's going to happen because I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, I just, I don't know. I feel it coming. So we'll see.
Your lips to God's ears, Ironhead.
All right, well, that's going to do it for today's show. We appreciate your tuning in. We hope you have a great weekend. Enjoy all of the football out there. And, we didn't even talk Steelers or Eagles, and I feel good about that.
Absolutely.
We'll talk to you again on Tuesday. Until then, be good and be safe.
Let's go, whoever's playing the Dolphins and Colts.
Lion Country Kia is offering exceptional deals on your new Kia during Kia's Command the Season event.
We have a nice selection on the 2021 Kia Sportage with various options and prices as low as $26,800, saving you $3,000. Or if you demand big power and towing capacity, slip into one of the 2021 Kia Sorrentos available on our lot, starting at $32,680.
Discover why Kia drivers throughout the area come to Lion Country Kia or visit online at lioncountrykia.com.
Quaker Steak and Lube is throwing open the garage doors and setting up the umbrellas. It's patio season. Come enjoy great food, drinks, and fun in the sun. There's always something happening at Quaker Steak and Lube, but we're really amping up our event calendars for our favorite time of year. Visit thelube.com to find out what's happening at your local lube this season. Lunch, happy hour, dinner, or late night, indoors or outside, at Quaker Steak and Lube, you'll always find big flavors, friendly faces, and lots of fun.
Hi, Johnny Broom here. If you're in the market for a new Hyundai or a pre-owned car, truck, van, or SUV, nobody beats a Blaze Alexander deal. But don't take my word for it.
Hey, Goon says tell him Johnny sent you.
Hey, tell him Johnny sent ya.
Tell him Johnny sent ya.
Wait, tell him Juan or tell him Johnny sent ya?
Tell him Johnny sent you.
Here at Bill Pickles Tap Room, we say,
tell him Johnny sent ya.
And remember,